Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about House Bill 148. If you're going to keep it just public land, and it's going to go from ownership of the federal government to the state, and we're not going to sell it all off and collect property tax on it, how is that going to benefit the schools? That's the question.
When you were promised, and we've been promised, and the expectation was multiple use, multiple yield, that's fast become no use and no yield over the vast majority of our land. When people say, well, why don't you think of something else to fund education? Well, what else have you got? We've got $1 trillion worth of resources to manage that multiple use. Let's get rid of the personal exemption. Some people bring that up. Well, that'll raise $380 million. Let's double income tax. Well, that'll bring in, a few $100 million. Let's tax the rich to 80%. Well, that'll bring in, a few $100 million. You're still billions of dollars away. We're $2 billion away from average in per pupil funding, $4 billion away from our neighboring states that have access to the land and resources on a per pupil funding basis. You're just not going to get there up here by shuffling scarce budget dollars around. And if you go the tax road, you're going to damage the economy to try to go there, and you're not even going to get there doing it. So there's not a lot of ways to get there. And then you add to that the fact that 40% of our budget is reliant on a fiscally unsustainable federal government. We got work to do, and we've not got a lot of time to do it.
You know, Chad, the example that I give again and again to, and again I talk about educational equality, which this bill, that's one of my main purposes for this bill, is the Sitla trust lands. Those trust lands, Section 2, 16, 32, and 36, were set aside for the school children of Utah. They have a group of people that watch over how that's spent. They protect the beneficiaries, or the school children of Utah. They make sure that the things that they're engaged with, trust lands, Kevin Carter's group, that they are things that will bring the most benefits, the greatest economic benefit to the school children of Utah. They have a board that takes care of that. That's what we're talking about, this Public Lands Commission. I see some oversight in there. I see the beneficiaries looking to say, how are you managing those lands for renewable resources and for the maximum benefit for the people of Utah, the school children and all the people? Because some of this money may go to higher education. Some of it may go to take care of our health care bills and for poor people too. But you can't do it under this federal scenario. You cannot do it. One of the things I think is an upside to this, I will really be glad to get federal law enforcement out of my rural communities. I think it's wrong that a person gets arrested by a federal law enforcement officer and goes to a magistrate rather than to a jury of their peers. It's one of the most depressing issues I have for my citizens down there, to have federal law enforcement officers tell them what they can and can't do. We had a race program down there called the Grand to Grand, where you went from the Grand Canyon down to the Grand Staircase, and guess what? The Grand Staircase said, you can't set foot in the National Monument, in the Grand Staircase. You can't have a run in the National Monument because it's a commercial enterprise. We've lost our movie filming industry. Utah and Kane County was a huge place for it. It's called Little Hollywood. The state of Utah, big place with the Sundance Festival. We could film films again. There are many ways. There's no limit to the amount of entrepreneurial things that could happen on these public lands if we could manage them within the state of Utah for the benefit of our people here. Our people came here in 1847 to get away from some of these controls that were out there, and they're still here, and they're still, I think they're still the best stewards of this land right in this area here. So I think we can do it. We can do a great job. We can bring more money back into the economy, and we can take care of this educational problem once and for all and have educational equality in the state of Utah.
The popular notion is to raise money. The popular notion is to raise money is all going to come from strip mines, oil wells, shale development. They see a moonscape.
Let me tell you a secret on that.
Okay.
That people
defend that point.
Right now, the Utah Division of Oil and Gas and Mining has in place, and has had in place for several years, a regulation that governs all oil and gas drilling. It says, for every acre that an exploration company disturbs, they have to reclaim not only that acre when the life of the drilling rig is over, but multiple other acres as well. So that means every time there's additional oil and gas activity, that means that more acres get reclaimed. What we're doing there through regulation is we're harnessing the capital and the financial strength of oil and gas companies to do what? To do the job of reclamation. Now, for the uninitiated, reclamation means where you take a disturbed land, you remove all these evidences of disturbance, you reseed it, you replant native vegetation. And so I know it seems counterintuitive, but through a more active drilling program, we could reclaim net more acres in the state. That's one example.
And it is fair to point out, people like Mel Coonrod out of Price, who does the rehab for Bill Barrett, has actually improved over the original state of the land by, I mean, he actually makes better game preserve land than they started with.
The West Havaputz Plateau, the center of all drilling, is fast becoming a much better ecological area.
That's absolutely true.
That you can defend that hands down, and yet the message that gets sent out is that the opposite is happening. Let's take another example. There used to be sawmills that dotted the landscape in rural Utah. And at the same time, our forests used to be healthy. Two things happened. Leave it alone policies took over the Forest Service. The sawmills shut down. And what happened? Things got out of balance ecologically. Old growth stands became so choked, they choked out diverse aspen stands, they choked out diversity of young trees, and made those forest stands sitting ducks for what? Bark beetle infestation. And it's a west-wide phenomenon because why? Because the Forest Service west-wide has turned into what was once an agricultural ethic to a leave-it-alone pseudo-wilderness ethic. And we're now paying the price. We're paying the price economically through a loss of a lumber and timber industry, and we're paying the price ecologically through, Chad, I think you know, a lot of our forests are a mess.
I will have you test it. I was up on the Dixie on Cedar Mountain this last weekend, and I was shocked 2 years ago when I went mountain biking across there.
Counties lay that at the feet of pseudo-wilderness management on forests.
Exactly what it is. Well, and there are federal regulations out there, federal laws, Threatened Endangered Species Acts for one, that have precluded any normal way to manage the forest. You can't manage it. To spot it out took out more jobs and more timber. And now you go down to Home Depot and you end up buying a board from China when we could be doing it in our own country here, in our own state. It's sad what they've done. You know, that's the thing I look at too, is what the environmental communities have done through the federal government and through laws that were passed in Congress for their youth. They've taken jobs away. They've taken jobs away from our people.
Okay. We got just a minute to sum up. I'm going to give that to you, Representative Ivory.
You know, you trace the history from 1780 to 1894, when our Enabling Act was done. 1896, we were made a state. 1915, when our Senate said, hey, you changed the policy. This contemporaneous history in 1833 by Andrew Jackson lays it out. He says, I do not doubt that it is the real interest of each and all the states of the Union, and particularly of the new states, that the price of these lands shall be reduced and graduated. After they've been offered for a certain number of years, the refuse remaining unsold shall be abandoned to the states, and the machinery of our land system entirely withdrawn. It cannot be supposed the compacts intended that the United States should retain forever a title to the lands within the states, which are of no value, and no doubt is entertained that the general interest would be best promoted by surrendering such lands to the states. That history is consistent from 1780 to the time of our statehood. You get into the progressive period and it started to change. All we're asking is that the federal government honor the promise that was made to Utah, to Utah's children and Utah's future at our statehood.
Excellent point. Thanks for wrapping it up that way. Thank you for staying with us on the county seat. We invite you to tune in weekly. In between, please go to our Facebook page and make your comments, and you can view this show again on thecountyseat.tv. Be sure to tell your friends about it. We'll see you.